Greetings, I'm Elijah, Sun Card 19, and welcome back to the Tarot course. Today's lesson is about swords. So the suit of swords represents thought or the element air, and they indicate a lot of times they indicate conflict or just opposing thoughts in general. But not always. Sometimes they represent some really good things. But sometimes a lot of times this deck or this card, this suit is considered the unlucky suit or the trouble or conflict suit. So we'll see that there are some cards that do represent some conflict throughout this suit. Okay, up first we have the Ace of Swords, and this card is about a new thought or a new way of thinking, just a new approach to things. You'll see a sword in the background, and you'll see seems like sort of a cold environment of some sort. A lot of times I look at this card as a time to trim the fat and get rid of things that are unnecessary. Up next we have the Two of Swords, and here we have a person seated. They have the swords crossed across their chest, their eyes blindfolded, and it seems like this person just doesn't have an answer right now, and they're sort of blinded to the possibilities. So this card is often about crossroads. You're just sort of feeling stuck between two decisions or two major thoughts. Up next we have the Three of Swords. And this card is a card about, of course we see a heart pierced by three swords and a storm in the background. And this could be a conflict in love life, or it could represent distance from family. So some sort of, something is causing people to not get along or, be on the best page with each other. So being a low number in the suit, could represent a temporary type of situation. And the storm also indicates that it's a temporary situation because, of course, storms pass. Up next we have the Four of Swords, and the Four of Swords is a card that indicates that rest is needed. This is one of the few cards in the deck that does not have a sky background. And so we see a person seated or laying down, three swords above, one below, and this could indicate that the person really is on the brink of really needing rest, and if they're not getting rest or de-stressing, they could potentially hurt themselves. Up next we have the Five of Swords. And this shows a person similar to the Five of Cups, where they have three of something and two dropped, and they're sort of looking over their shoulder. And so we sort of get the idea of mistrust from this card. Someone is, either is not appreciating what they have, or they're distrusting the people around them. So it depends on how you look at the card. Or it could be someone who is wronging the people around them. Here we have the Six of Swords, and the biggest theme of this card is moving away from trouble. So we'll see stormy water here down in this corner, and we'll see calm water up here, higher up in the card. So a lot of times what you'll see is sort of the moving away from, or the passage through from stormy waters to calm waters. So this is sort of the end of the storm, or moving away from storm. And this is sort of a passage card where things are getting better. Up next we have the Seven of Swords, and again we get that same theme where we have five of something in one hand and two dropped. There's not really anyone else around, so what this card can indicate two things is someone who is maybe sort of just looking over their shoulder and not really appreciating what they have, and sort of like missing out on what they have. So they're giving up the five that they have for the two that they're missing. The other thing this card could represent is someone stealing something, or thievery. Someone is just sort of on the run. Someone who, or it could be someone taking their own stuff and just leaving. So, but it's sort of just looking over your shoulder unnecessarily. Here we have the Eight of Swords, and this card is sort of a fenced-in type of card where the thoughts have now, struck this person down to the point where they can't even move. What you'll notice is that there's no one else in the scene, so this person is not, bound by anyone else. This person is bound by themselves, and the swords in one sense could be protecting the person, but in another sense they're boxing the person in. So they're being protected and or stuck by their own thoughts. Again, we have a blindfolded person, so they just really can't see that there's opportunity around them, or they can't see how easily they could get out of the situation if they tried. Here we have the Nine of Swords, which is sort of a continuation of the Eight. Now this person is really stuck. They're laying in bed, a lot of anxiety here. The swords are parallel, they're sort of above the person. And, they could be a ladder, but maybe a tough sledding type of ladder. You'll notice that there's a blanket with a lot of different emblems and even some zodiac signs. But a lot of people, what I've talked to, have really equated the blanket to social pressure. This person is being tied up or held down by the expectations and pressures of other people. So there's a lot of conflict in this person's life, a lot of anxiety. This person just really has trouble living up to the expectations of others, and the only way out really is to live their own life. And the further continuation of all those is the Ten of Swords. And this card is pretty much overkill. The thinking process or the thought process has pretty much run this person out of the situation. They have basically no chance. They didn't, you doesn't take 10 swords to kill someone, but this card is like really overdoing it. So it's overkill. It is one of the 3 cards in the deck, or maybe 2 cards in the deck with actually a black sky, and it's really the end of a cycle. This thing is over. Time to move on. On to the court cards, we have the Page of Swords. And so this card is sort of the idea of, when I think of this card, I think of someone who just has a plan, and someone who either has a plan or needs a plan, depending on how it comes up in the reading. But this person seems to be very carefree and not really a lot going on. So sometimes this person does well with no plan, or depending on the reading, this is someone who may really need a plan. So this is just planning and the thoughts before action. The Knight of Swords is someone who now has taken action on the thoughts, and so full steam ahead. You'll see this is probably the card with the most movement in it. The one thing about this card does indicate, if you look at the trees, they may be going against the wind. So it seems like they're fighting the wind a little bit. So somewhat uphill, but this person is very goal-oriented, really go-getter, just really going to get after it. Full steam ahead. This is a card to me. In a reading, it also indicates pace. So when I see this card, I see things speeding up or happening quicker. Up next, we have the Queen of Swords. And now this is someone who is really established in their thoughts. Very strong, powerful thinking person. This person they seem somewhat lonely, but they've sort of mastered their skills. They are no longer in a rush. They know exactly where they're going. And they're just someone who's just very goal-oriented, very strong-minded person. Maybe not as emotional as could be, but very strong-minded. And here we have the King of Swords. And so this person is pretty much at rest now. This thoughts are very stable, very mindful. This is someone who's very protective. Someone who really just no BS type of person, very straightforward. Very protective. A lot of times people think of these people as like police officers and soldiers, and just people who are just very protective, straightforward, no nonsense, oftentimes lacking empathy, but definitely a straightforward, protective type of person. So that's the Suit of Swords, and as you saw, could potentially be a lot of conflict involved, but that's okay. All right, love and light. Peace.